Before comparing the European and Chinese automotive industries, let's look at the automotive history of both civilizations. Since the Chinese automotive industry is still very young, let's start with European history. When you hear the word Mercedes-Benz, you have euphoric feelings towards the German automotive industry. You can't help but admire the precision and reliability of the German automotive industry and its contribution to the automotive industry. What about the French automotive industry? As shown in the movie Taxi, the French value their cars above their wives. What about the Italian automotive industry? And what about Ferrari? Hearing the word Ferrari, people are immersed in the magical world of cars. Who doesn't dream of owning a flying, luxurious red Ferrari? Don't you want to say goodbye to your neighbors? When it comes to cars, it's impossible not to mention the English automotive industry. When you hear the word Rolls-Royce, you can't help but think of yourself. You feel like a member of the British royal family. And all this praise is certainly deserved by the European automotive industry. Of course, there's a lot to be said about the European automotive industry. It's certainly worth remembering that the automotive industry began with the production of steam locomotives. But it's also important to remember that the first commercial passenger car was created in Europe. The first modern car was a Benz. The patent motor wagon, Benz patent motor car, created in 1886 by German inventor Carl Benz, was patented on January 29, 1886, and became the first commercial vehicle with an internal combustion engine. Thus, the European automotive industry is approaching a century and a half since its inception. What hasn't this industry survived during this time? It has survived 2 world wars and several economic crises, but the European automotive industry has maintained its leadership to this day. For example, Germany alone supplies the world with 6 million cars per year. 6 million people is equivalent to the population of Miami. The automotive industry can be called Europe's flagship industry. Now let's move on to the slightly younger Chinese automotive industry. Of course, the Chinese auto industry can't boast as rich a history as its European counterpart, but given that the first automobile factory in China was built in 1931, that's already a century of history. During this time, the Chinese auto industry has also gone through many stages, surviving 1 world war and several economic crises. If we look at modern Chinese history, we see that. The 20th century was a period of revolutions, wars, and fundamental changes in Chinese history. The fall of the Qing Empire, 1912, the birth of the Republic of China, the struggle between the Kuomintang and the CPC, the Japanese invasion, 1937 to 1945, and finally, the victory of the Communists in 1949, which proclaimed the People's Republic of China and marked the beginning of the Mao Zedong era. In the 1950s, relations between the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union began to improve. Naturally, the government of the People's Republic of China turned to the Soviet Union for assistance in developing the automotive industry. Prior to this, the Soviet Union had American experience in the automotive industry. America had assisted the Soviet Union in developing the American automotive industry. And the Soviet Union agreed to help and built an automobile plant in 1953. The USSR played a significant role in the development of the Chinese automotive industry in the 1950s, helping build the first large automobile factories such as FAW, or First Automobile Works, and Dongfeng, or Second Automobile Works, in Changchun, and providing technology, equipment, and specialists. This assistance laid the foundation for the development of the modern Chinese automotive industry, which today is one of the largest in the world. First Automobile Works, FAW, Soviet engineers and specialists participated in the design and construction of the plant and transferred technologies and equipment, which later became China's largest automobile group, FAW. Second Automobile Plant, Dongfeng, founded with Soviet support, it produced trucks using the experience of the Gorky Automobile Plant. Scope of assistance. The USSR helped establish not only automobile factories, but also 156 other industrial enterprises in 17 provinces of China, contributing to the industrialization of the country. Copying models. Chinese SUVs such as the Beijing BJ212 4x4 were copied from Soviet models such as the UAZ 469. Further development. After the 1960s, Soviet influence weakened due to political discord, but the foundation was laid for the Chinese automotive industry to develop independently. Today, China is the world leader in automobile exports, including electric vehicles, and its companies SAIC and Chery.
If we look at the modern automotive industry of the 21st century, we see that the number of Chinese cars on the streets and highways is growing every year, and we are becoming accustomed to it with each passing day. Will this always be the case? Yes, of course, it is quite possible. There are many reasons for this. We have already briefly reviewed the history of the European and Chinese automotive industries in the 20th century. If you look closely, the Chinese automotive industry, which could not even supply its own market with cars, lags significantly behind the American, European, and Japanese industries and has always strived to catch up. In the 20th century, the Chinese government dreamed of bringing it to the level of the American, European, and Japanese industries, but the Chinese industry lacked the experience and specialists, and the political regime did not allow this. However, the world does not stand still. Since the economy has always been developing, the automotive industry is
developing in step with the global economy. The 21st century will be the era of the Chinese automotive industry. It looks like this will be the case. There are many reasons for this. First of all, this is confirmed by the growing number of Chinese cars on our streets and highways. What's behind the conquest of Chinese automobiles in global markets? Have the established automotive giants of Japan, Europe, America, and even more so Korea allowed this to happen? But recent events show that this is becoming a reality. Has the Chinese identity reached this level of development unnoticed by the global automotive giants? Or are the Chinese so nimble that the global automotive giants are overlooking them? The Chinese love to compare their automotive industry to the European one. We know that the European automotive industry is a global leader. Therefore, in today's video, we will discuss the mistakes, shortcomings, successes, and challenges of European automakers and how they are pushing the Chinese forward. Let's look at the European automotive industry in the recent past. Of course, after the 1980s, European automakers were doing well. Despite intense pressure from Japanese automakers, this competition was on the European side. The reason is that everyone knew about European automakers. Western Europe is dominated by German, VW, Mercedes, BMW, French, Peugeot, Renault, and Italian, Fiat, manufacturers. Since the 1980s and 1990s, the European automotive industry experienced globalization, consolidation, technological revolution, electronics, safety, the transition to new markets and environmental concerns, as well as deeper integration, as a result of which German, French, Italian, and other brands became part of larger companies competing with Japanese, Korean, and American manufacturers, especially in the areas of efficiency, quality, and innovation, with an emphasis on fuel economy and new emissions standards. All of this was well within the capabilities of the Europeans. But Japanese, Korean, and American automakers did not want to be left behind. Therefore, Europeans were forced to introduce various innovations into their cars. These innovations led to the further popularity of European cars. For example, electronics and safety. The introduction of ABS, airbags, electronic engine management systems, and catalytic converters improved safety and environmental friendliness. Cars from some European manufacturers are also popular among taxi drivers. These cars can easily travel 1 million kilometers. Mercedes-Benz, the D-Series, W123, W124, and 240D models with OM617 diesel engines are renowned for their durability. Even taxi drivers have driven them for between 2 and 4.5 million kilometers. BMW 3 Series, E30 325i models have logged millions of kilometers in testing. Volvo, the 240 and 140 series, as well as the legendary P1800, are renowned for their durability. But if all is well, why did the Chinese begin to make progress in the automotive industry? To understand the reasons, we need to look at the global economic situation after 1985. The global market was awash with electronic goods, personal computers, televisions, tape recorders, VCRs, electronic toys, and so on. The number of electronic components in automotive parts was limitless. Electronic manufacturing was a small-scale operation requiring millions of workers. Such a labor force did not exist in Europe. Europe's population was not growing, but shrinking.
At the same time, thanks to the reforms of Chinese President Deng Xiaoping, China, with a working population of 100 million, was opening up to the world. Deng encouraged industrialists from all over the world to establish production in China. Naturally, manufacturing in China was very profitable for global companies, as labor was cheap there. Favorable infrastructure conditions were created, land allocation was ensured, and tax incentives were introduced. All these conditions attracted the attention of global industrialists and investors to China. As a result, thousands of European, American, Japanese, and Korean brands opened their factories in China. Electronics production, which requires a large labor force, developed particularly rapidly. These developments in China were beneficial to both investors and the Chinese government and people, despite the need to work up to 12 hours a day. Furthermore, the hard work of the Chinese allowed them to master Western, Japanese, and Korean technologies. Naturally, these processes led to an improvement in the financial situation of the Chinese people. This period lasted until the 2000s. After 2000, Chinese industry reached a very high level, with annual gross domestic product growing at 11%, and more brands, factories and companies from around the world opening their factories, offices and research centers. These processes led to a further improvement in the financial situation of the Chinese government and the population. The improved financial situation of the population increased demand for European cars. In China, for middle-class families, owning a European car was a dream come true. Yes, these events took place in China. Large-scale expansion. In the 2000s, most European brands, Audi, BMW, Peugeot, Renault, and Fiat, created their own joint ventures with Chinese partners FAW, SACG, Dongfeng, Brilliance, and GAC to produce cars for the local market using local production facilities. Of course, producing cars in China was very profitable, as China's population exceeded 1 billion and most people wanted to buy European cars. Who wouldn't? After all, it was a dream come true. But this process also had a downside. Automakers were forced to localize production. This led to technology transfer to the Chinese government. At the time, China was secretly focused on developing its own auto industry. It must be said that the Chinese are masters of technological copying. Now, let's return to the history of European automakers in the years after 2000. Of course, the situation for European manufacturers improved